coming up next. What would compel this devoted mother of three and wife of a high-profile criminal prosecutor to deliberately and repeatedly break the law?
I was desperate to try anything to keep him alive.
An incredible story of the lengths a mom will go to save her son and preserve her family. The least likely criminal, coming up next.
Tonight only on Fox, the least likely criminal. A mother of three who broke the law repeatedly out of love for her son, breaking the very laws that her husband, a powerful prosecutor, was sworn to uphold.
She learned years ago that only marijuana would actually help her son, who was the victim of a pedestrian car accident. And at the time, there was no way she could legally obtain it. Fox 10 photojournalist Brad Gass spoke to Cindy and her husband about the risks they took to help their son. Here's their story in their own words.
Bennett was a smart, outgoing, happy young man, and we had hopes and dreams for him, just like every other family. In 1997, Bennett was 14 years old, and then our life changed forever.
911 emergency. There's a body laying in the street outside, right on Guadalupe. Is he bleeding? Can you tell where he's bleeding from?
I drove by and there's many people around him. I can just see him kind of shaking and convulsing, you know.
He was crossing the road and he was struck by a car that was going about 45 miles an hour. When Mel and I arrived at the scene, it was taped off in yellow, like there was a fatality. There was a crowd, there were ambulance, fire trucks, and a helicopter hovering above the scene. I knew then it was really, really bad. Bennett had a severe brain injury. He was in a coma, he was on a ventilator, and he had third-degree burns over his body from the hot pavement. It just got worse. The months and years following the accident were filled with brain surgery, removing a piece of his brain at UCLA, stimulators being implanted, burn care, plastic surgeries, tons of therapies, speech therapies, and then came the seizures. Things got really complicated. When he started having the seizures, he was on 3 seizure meds, and they made him deathly ill and nauseated. He started losing weight.
He had gone from 188 pounds to 119 pounds, and we could literally see him dying in front of our eyes.
I want people to understand that we were desperate. We'd tried everything that we could, and we were just completely out of options.
Unbeknownst to me, a neighbor had mentioned to my wife he ought to try marijuana. It will calm his stomach down, it will help the nausea.
You want me to give marijuana to my teenager? Are you out of your mind? And by the way, it's illegal. I knew I couldn't tell my husband. He was very much against illegal drugs. I knew I had to do this on my own.
There was a lot that she was doing that she didn't want me to know about, primarily buying marijuana for her son. The most striking part was the utter lack of dignity that my wife would have to pursue to get the drugs. She would have to deal with unsavory people. She would have to meet in the park, or as I found it in the book, sometimes she would go to South Phoenix.
Sometimes I would go down to the drug dealer and I couldn't believe that I was actually doing this, that this is what my life was, but I didn't see another alternative. But there was times I would laugh by myself going, nobody would ever believe this is what I'm doing. I should be having lunch or shopping. I'm at the drug dealer getting marijuana.
The irony is, from 1981 to 1985, I was United States Attorney. Appointed by President Reagan as U.S. Attorney, I was the chief federal law enforcement officer in the state, and our priority for our district was drugs. Our big crusade was fighting drugs.
Oh yeah, that was a really big problem.
And so I was now faced with a new dilemma that the marijuana product, which is illegal, enables him to eat, hold his medicines down, and keep him alive, versus if I'm in any way involved with it, aiding and abetting in any way, it could cost me my profession and my license.
Right after the break, find out how long Mel McDonald could remain silent. A federal prosecutor whose son was taking illegal drugs. It wasn't easy.
And we're going to learn how crucial a vote to legalize medical marijuana was to this family. Don't go away. See how the story ends coming up.
You're watching the best Fox 10 News.
Welcome back. Cindy McDonald's book is entitled The Least Likely Criminal. And as we saw earlier, she broke the law repeatedly, buying marijuana for her critically injured son, the only drug that would help him. This, as her famous husband, United States Attorney for Arizona, Mel McDonald, was vigorously prosecuting drug crimes.
Starting in 2010, attitudes about medical marijuana started to change here in Arizona and nationwide. But for Cindy, it remained a struggle to still break the law, all while politicians struggled with the issue of medical marijuana, and while her husband, Mel McDonald, struggled to stay silent. Photojournalist Brad Gass finishes the story again in their own words.
I went and told Mel about the marijuana, that I was bringing it into the house. It was not pretty.
Well, the conversations back then is I recognized she had to do what she needed to do to keep her son alive. And I told her I would help her in any way I could, but I could not be a part of possessing the marijuana, acquiring the marijuana.
My husband looked the other way for quite a few years and didn't ask. I just would get the marijuana and he wouldn't ask about it. He wanted nothing to do with it.
Even when she had it in the house, I made sure that she kept it separate from me, that I wasn't involved with it, that when she'd give him the marijuana, I didn't want to be affiliated with it because I didn't want to have a situation that would compromise my oath as an attorney.
And it became legal, and then it was repealed, and I was devastated. I was literally laying on the floor crying, saying we should have done more. I should have stood up for these people. These people deserve to have dignity. They deserve to get their medication.
In 2010, neither she nor I spoke out in support, again with this image that having been a top drug law enforcement, I wasn't thinking that I would ever be a proponent. It was only in 2012 when the legislature decided he wanted to repeal the initiative that I felt like I couldn't stay silent any longer.
Until 1997, I never dreamed that I would be standing at this dais as an advocate for marijuana.
I found out a few days later that he had contacted the legislature and he was willing to come out and be an advocate for medical marijuana now, so that I could have my dream come true, that I didn't have to be a criminal anymore. But most important to me is for the people that really do need this for medical purposes.
I think we've made fabulous progress since 2012. It is now legalized not only in Arizona but in many of the states. There are legitimate medicinal purposes to marijuana. I wouldn't have believed it had I not seen it. It hasn't been a cure-all, but it has dramatically improved the quality of his life.
Are you feeling?
The great blessing, I think, is to see what it's done for her. For years, from 1997 to 2012, she had to live this life of secrecy, getting illegal drugs, having the pressure of possibly being pulled over, knowing the humiliation of she's arrested, her name is going to be in the headlines as having been involved with possessing marijuana. When the true story was that she, like any loving mother, would do whatever was necessary to protect her son and to keep him alive.
My husband ended up being my greatest champion and fighting so that I could help my son, our son, have the dignity that he deserved.
Oh, my mom means worlds to me. If there's one person in my family I could rely on the most, it would probably have to be my mother. I mean, she's very, very caring. She deserves so much credit for getting through my hardships in my life.
I will always be his champion. I'll always have hopes and dreams for him. And that's what this whole story is about, is not judging other people's journey. We need to try to look at other people's journeys as everybody's just trying to figure it out.
Cindy McDonald has written a book about her experiences with co-author Jenny Grossman. It's called The Least Likely Criminal. If you want to learn more about it, we've got a link on fox10phoenix.com.